Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back, Muggles, for another session on the spirituality from Harry Potter, or spiritual lessons from Harry Potter, I should say. And we are on the Sorcerer's Stone, chapter 7 and 8 will be for today. And this is the part in the story where the adventure really begins. And whenever my husband and I are like, oh my gosh, the adventure is starting, it's the Harry Potter theme song just starts playing in our head. So Harry is on the Hogwarts Express, and now he is getting off and getting to see Hogwarts for the first time. He's going to get sorted into his school. It is it's all happening. It's starting to happen now. Okay, so chapter 7 is called The Sorting Hat. And what do I've got in my notes? Okay, so obviously Harry is extremely nervous and worried about getting sorted. What's going to happen? Where's he going to go? And he says this line. Right, so now he's in line, waiting his turn. They're going in alphabetical order for, all the kids to get sorted. And it says, a horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're very nervous. What if he wasn't chosen at all? What if he's just sat there with the hat over his eyes for ages until Professor McGonagall jerked it off his head and said there had obviously been a mistake and he'd better get back on the train? Okay. A horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts always do when you're very nervous. Our minds are out of control, right? You might have heard of the monkey brain, or, there's all sorts of different terms for it. But we're constantly having thoughts. Thoughts are constantly racing, and our thoughts tend to be negative. And then when we're in stressful or nervous situation, we can just get these outrageously negative thoughts that amplify things and then make them even worse, right? So a horrible thought strikes him, first maybe you're thinking he might be worried he's not going to be in Gryffindor like his parents were. But no, the thought is, I won't be chosen at all. I'll just sit there and then McGonagall is going to kick me out and I'll be taken out of school, right? Just this wild thought that isn't really, within the context of what could happen. He's going to get sorted into one of the houses, right? And you might be fearful that it will take a long time, or you'll get into a house you don't want to go into, but that you're just not going to be sorted. So I think that this is just such a beautiful illustration of just such a common phenomenon that we all experience, right? Having these wild, rampant thoughts that just really just make us feel bad, make us worry, make us afraid, make us scared. And someone's asking, what am I talking about? I am talking about the spiritual lessons from Harry Potter. We are in the first book of the series called The Sorcerer's Stone on chapter 7. And this is a series where I am going through and pulling out the little gems that are in the story that we can relate to for our life. So in this moment, the gem that I'm pulling out is how, if we aren't paying attention and don't learn how to train our minds will and very often go into negative, wild, fearful thoughts. And that the practice of the underlying practice that we are taught in Islam, right, in spirituality, what spiritual teachings are here to teach us, is to regulate and control our minds and think positively. And it's not thinking positively and just okay, let me just be positive, good vibes only. It is in the sense of what does Allah command us to do? He commands us to worship him and to remember him, right? Remember him in the sense that what that is going to do for you when you remember Allah and you remember His majesty and you remember that He created everything and you remember that He's taking care of everything, that, you know, the trees are growing and the rivers are flowing and the birds are flying, you know, suspended in the air, you know, not dropping out of the sky because of, you know, because of gravity, that your nails grow without your thought, that your heart beats on its own. When you remember all that is being done without any effort, all the ways that you are supported, that you have breath, you know, air to breathe that just filters through your body, that supports your life, that you will remember Allah is taking care of you. Allah is the one who provides. Allah is on your side. Things are working in your favor. Things are happening for your good. There is blessings all around you. You are surrounded by blessings. I love the hearts, right? And that when you do that, when you make dhikr, right? What is making dhikr is to remember, you know, it's not just to repeat the subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, just repeating these things. It is to remember Allah is greater. Allah is greater than this. Allahu Akbar. Allah is greater than all of this. Allah is supporting me through all of this. Allah is greater than my challenge, than my struggle, than my fear, right? Subhanallah, like the majesty of Allah, right? It's to remember, to make dhikr is to remind yourself and put yourself in positive thoughts, because when we don't, we will be struck with negative thoughts that will spiral us into doom and gloom and fear and worry. And then we can begin to act on those thoughts. And then that produces a whole other host of awfulness, because what we tend to act when we act out of fear, we tend to try to manipulate or to be over controlling or to retreat or to, you know, give up, and all of these things that prevent us from being in the flow with the blessings of our life. So this line, a horrible thought struck Harry, as horrible thoughts do when you're very nervous, is just that reminder that we have to notice when a horrible thought is striking and not cling on to it, not allow it in, be like, nope, no thank you. Allah is with me. I've got this, or Allah's got this, and things will be okay, and I'm going to think better. Okay. Right. So then he finally does get to sit down in the stool, and the sorting hat is put on his head. And the sorting hat, you know, begins like doing its sorting thing. Like, okay, I see this, I see that. You know, what does it say? There's not a bad mind, there's talent. Oh my goodness, yes. And a nice thirst to prove it. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? Harry gripped the edge of his stool and thought, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. Not Slytherin, eh? Said the small voice. Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on your way to greatness. No doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor. And this little exchange we learn in later books, but it's clearly right here, right, shows that Harry has a preference, right? He has a preference to be in the house where his parents were in Gryffindor, and then he's heard bad things about Slytherin, that all the witches that went bad came from Slytherin, so he doesn't want to be in that house. He doesn't want to be associated with that house. And the sorting hat is, you know, narrating in his mind, like, okay, I see, like, you could go to Slytherin and you could go to Gryffindor, and like, you know, you could do well in this house. And then Harry has his preference, like, no, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. And the hat takes that preference into consideration, and it says, okay, well then Gryffindor. And I want to, you know, they bring it up when it's brought up again in later books, the point is underscored, but to just make that point now, like, we often as Muslims are asking for what we want, dreaming about what we want, working towards different things that we want, the jobs that we want, the vacations we want to go on, the marriage that we want to have, the charities we want to support, the good works, the creative things we want to do. But for many of us, it's kind of like this unspoken thing in the Muslim community. It's like, well, you don't know if you can trust your preference, and we don't know what where you got this preference, and it might not be good for you, and maybe Allah doesn't want it for you. So just try to work towards what you want, but be prepared for you not to get anything that you want, or to try and have the life you want or live the life you want. And all of these things that I'm talking about, especially with the negative thoughts, like that is what I do in coaching. Like this is what I work with through my clients. So I'm like, how do I notice the negative thought, not get attached to it, and then tell myself a different story. And that is what Islam came to guide us to. And unfortunately, we've lost like that practical aspect, and that group and community and one-on-one support to help us to shift our minds from the typical place of negativity to positivity. And that's what my husband and I do in our coaching programs, is that we support you to do that. And then we have a whole community so that you're doing it with a whole bunch of other people, and you just are feeling super empowered. So now we're talking about Harry's preference to be in Gryffindor, and that feeling that many Muslims have, that like my preference doesn't have any weight. And here, with the Sorting Hat, Harry's preference has weight, and the Sorting Hat puts him in Gryffindor. And what I'm sharing with you, what I believe, is that our preferences do have weight with Allah for the good and pure things that we want, for the preferences also that like have no, there's, who's to say what is better? What is better, that I want to live on a farm versus that I want to live in a city? Like what is better? What is more, more good or right than the other? So where did that preference come from? Where did your desire to, live on a ranch with horses come from versus your desire to be in a hustling and bustling city and be close and connected to a lot of people? Who made you have a tendency for one or the other? Who created you that put that inclination that you enjoy more and thrive more in this type of environment over that? Allah did. Your good and pure preferences came from Allah. And so when you have this preference and you're like, I want to be in a hustling and bustling city, but I don't know if this is going to work out for me, or if Allah wants that for me. So I'm going to, ask for it, but not try too hard and not really go for it. It really just puts you at a disadvantage when you can say and honor and make dua for your preference. And we already know that dua can change destiny, that you can have an input and say in your life. So you can be like, you know what? I really do want to live in a city, or I really do want to live in a ranch. And I believe Allah will support and honor that preference, because I don't know why I prefer that more, or why I thrive in that environment more. So I'm going to trust that, Allah has wisdom behind that, and that's where I thrive. And so that Allah will support me to be in an environment that I thrive in. And I'm going to confidently assert it, and inshallah allow myself to receive it. Okay, so that's that tidbit from Harry being very clear about what he doesn't want, and the Sorting Hat taking it into consideration. Okay, let's see. Then all the sorting is done, and everyone's in their house. And also this chapter is just so beautiful on how it's a description of the Great Hall and how magical it is, and their first view and glimpse of Hogwarts, coming off the lake and all of that. Like, just love all of it. So this is their first introduction, Harry's first introduction to Dumbledore in a time that he can remember. Obviously, he met him when he was a 1-year-old, but now he's getting introduced to Albus Dumbledore, and everyone's been sorted, and Albus is welcoming the students and starting the feast. And he says, Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to say a few words, and here they are: nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. Thank you. He sat back down. Everybody clapped and cheered. Harry didn't know whether to laugh or not. And I just love this little, just how J.K. Rowling depicts Dumbledore, because we gather, right, that he is the most, we're told that he's the most powerful wizard, that he's the only one that Voldemort had feared, that they wanted him to be in the Ministry of Magic, but Dumbledore refused. He wants to be the headmaster of Hogwarts. So we have this wise, powerful, intelligent, smart, bright figure. And then here he's, the principal, the headmaster of the school, starting the school year. Okay, welcome. We're going to start eat. Here's a few words. And normally when someone says, here's a few words, they go on for a long speech and right, it's just nonsense. You're like, this is all unnecessary. What is this? But here he says, here's a few words. And he literally just says a few random words. And it just speaks to like how truly wise he is. That's like, you don't need to hear anything from me, right? Just eat your food. You can get the information. You can figure things out later, like whatever. Afterwards, he does, make a few announcements. But it's like, it just speaks to like the true wisdom and also like the levity of the situation. Like you're expecting like some somber, we are so grateful that you have joined Hogwarts. You are the best young wizards and wizards here, blah, 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 nonsense. And he's just like, all right, you're here. We all know what this is about. Says random words, nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. Now just go and eat your food. So for this, like the reflection of like someone who is really wise and someone who is really intelligent and someone who is really is that they speak less and is that they like have some humor about them. It is not that they take themselves so seriously. I am so great and I am so smart and I am so powerful. And we have a lot of that posturing and stuff in all parts of our society, from the tech people to the academics to the politicians to our religious figures. And for most people can see through the BS, like you're just a whole bunch of fluff. And so I just love that little point. Okay. What's next? Okay. So in this chapter, we also are introduced to ghosts. So there are several ghosts in Hogwarts that are floating around. They're translucent figures floating around. And one of them, the nearly headless Nick is the ghost for what? For Gryffindor. And the food appears, right, magically on the tables, and the ghost is going by, and he says, I haven't eaten for nearly 500 years, said the ghost. I don't need to, of course, but one does miss it. And so this note here, so my husband and I have been on a spiritual food journey also, like combined, we've lost like over 60 pounds. And part of what we've really begun to appreciate and understand about food, so this is like a different kind of spiritual note, is how little we need of it, right? And how we have guidance from the Quran and Sunnah around that, right? Like that fasting is a practice, that we know that the Prophet ﷺ and the companions went hungry by choice on purpose, as a way to kind of rein in their nafs and be, zuhud, some people who don't take so much from this world. And so just this like little note of nearly headless Nick saying like, he hasn't eaten for 500 years. He's dead, so he doesn't need to, but I still miss it. And it's just so kind of reflective of like, us too. There's a lot of things that we don't need to eat, that we just eat out of habit or out of comfort or just, out of socializing or just emotional eating. We think that this is gonna, make us feel better. We had a good day, so we're celebrating and eating this, or we had a bad day, so we're consoling ourselves and eating this. And we don't need to eat as much as we need to eat. And if you are interested in really diving deep into your relationship with food and understanding and appreciating that, my husband and I have a food freedom program, a spiritual food freedom program that guides you to kind of heal this relationship with food so you are free from kind of the common and really the way that we are socialized and taught to and programmed to eat just out of habit, that you eat this for breakfast, eat this for lunch, eat this at a party. When you go to an amusement park, eat this. when you're feeling sad, you like just the habitual way that we're eating. And like I told you guys, I'm reading this book, rereading it, right now, today. I just reread it, and I haven't read it in several years. And this is my first time reading it since I've been on my own food, journey. And I would not have noticed that line or paid attention to that line before having done that. And so sharing with you what I have learned, right? That's the point, right? We don't need to eat as much as we think we do. And even like when you're dead, like you're like, oh, I wish I could eat that, right? And I'm sure we've had that feeling like you're so full, and then someone comes out with something that you really love, and you're like, oh my God, I wish I had room to eat that, because I just want to eat it. Not because I'm hungry, but just because because whatever, you like the taste, whatever you associate with it, and so you just want to eat it. Okay, all right, that is what I have for chapter 7. In chapter 8, we are introduced to the potions master. Harry does have an encounter with him in chapter 7 where when he's sitting at the banquet hall and he looks up onto the head table, and when he looks at Snape, Quirrell and Snape are sitting next to each other, and when he looks at Snape, his scar starts to hurt. But that relates to the other part of the story. So in chapter 8, the potions master is where Harry goes to potions class, and Professor Snape is teaching it. And really, the main thing around this is, right, like, Snape dislikes Harry. It's obvious, it's clear, like he starts kind of bullying him from the moment he's in class. And the thing I want to point out for us here is that there will be people that don't like you. There will be people that are rude to you. There will be people that will be unkind to you, whether they are people that you are close to and that you know really well, or strangers that you encounter on the road or in a store. And that has nothing to do with you, right? It's pretty clear for Harry in this case, like, I don't know why this guy doesn't like me. I've just shown up here and whatever. But for many of us, we may not necessarily feel that it's clear. We may feel like, did I do something? Did I say something? Did I offend them? And we put a lot of weight on ourselves, or we internalize it that there's something wrong with us, or we need to change, or something about the way that we are is not good or should be different. And if we did change in that way, then, that person, these people would like us, or wouldn't have done those things to us, or won't treat us that way. And this is really just to point out, right, like the issues that Snape has with Harry are his own issues, right? We'll find out later what all of them are, but they're his own issues that have nothing to do with Harry. And so the more that we can kind of appreciate that the way people treat you has to do with them and doesn't have to do with you, is going to really, really support you from getting into kind of that space where you think there's something wrong with you, or that you feel like you need to change and be different to get people to like you, right? You don't need to change, and you don't need to be different for people to like you. You are absolutely likable and lovable just as you are. And if anyone has any issues or problems, or is coming at you with any sort of negativity or energy that you don't like, or that feels bad, it has to do with them. It has to do with them. Okay. And then the last thing is that towards the end of this chapter is where Harry makes the connection between, they've been mentioning that Gringotts has been robbed, and that, this is a newsworthy story because no one's tried to rob Gringotts, and it's really extremely difficult to. And nothing was taken because the vault that the people tried to enter into was already empty. And Harry now makes the connection that the day of the robbery was the day that he was there with Hagrid, when Hagrid emptied a vault. And so just like him being aware, paying attention to what's happening, what's going on, putting together pieces. And again, this is something that, I mentioned in previous things that we do, we are, our minds are amazing and they can recognize and fit together pieces. But for a lot of things, we kind of overlook them, write them off as coincidence or random, or, oh no, it's nothing. And we don't investigate them further to figure out, is it really something? Is there a real connection here? Or is it, or is it just loose things that I've kind of forced to fit together? And one way I want to really make note of this, so that I do, or you may not know, but I do a lot of relationship coaching around women who want to get married, men and women who want to get married, and like the fear that you're going to interact with someone or be talking to someone and they are misleading you, or they are lying to you, or you can't trust them, or how do I really know that this person is, who they say they are, or that, I do like them, and like now, do I feel confident in committing to marriage for them? And what I'm bringing up, making this connection here, is like, you will see clues and hints. A friend says something, you overhear something, you happen to see something on social media. And if it is giving you the feeling of like, this seems like it's off, or this seems like something here, go investigate, right? Like, we're talking about ethical investigation. You're not talking about like, trying to spy on people and whatever, but go and dig, right? Especially when it comes to, someone wanting to get married and seeing something that makes them uncomfortable or makes them nervous, right? Red flags. There's red flags, usually are easily spotted, right? That you will feel and know that a red flag has come up. Where the issue happens with people with red flags is that they don't know what to do next. I've noticed a red flag, now what? And this is what I'm trying to point out for you. The now what is to investigate and talk about it and have those conversations. Figure out, what does this mean? What did I notice here? What did I see here that is of concern? And how can I now get clarity around it so it can be addressed? And you really, especially when you're talking to someone for marriage, you want to... Okay, I don't know. My alarm went off. All right, well, anyways, that is a great place for us to end. We will be back with chapter 9 next time. So tell your friends, share the gems, read the books. It's a fun read, and you're getting so many spiritual lessons. So, go read the books. Assalamu alaikum. Okay, and someone's saying, thank you so much for this session. I'm not really a fan of Harry Potter, but I love the idea of reflecting on a book and learning lessons and having reminders. Yes, that's exactly it, right? Like, and I've said it before, right? A story is such a beautiful, easy way for us to be able to reflect on our life and get a reminder, because the story will help. You'll remember the story, and if you can remember the story, then that'll trigger you to remember the lesson. Sometimes we learn lots of lessons, right? We're taught lessons all the time. We were taught in school all sorts of lessons. But if it's just like, this is the lesson, right? The lesson is, the lesson is like with red flags. The lesson is, if someone is lying to you, confront them. Okay, I've learned that lesson. But when you hear it now in a whole story of someone who, encountered someone, they lied to them, and how they had to confront them, and what came after the confrontation, you're going to absorb and appreciate and understand how to apply that lesson so much more, if that ever were a situation were ever to occur to you, than just trying to remember, than just knowing the lesson. Okay, if someone lies to me, confront them. Because people are lying to you all the time, right? Your bosses are lying to you, your children are lying to you, people are lying all the time. But if you don't have a practical way for you to be able to now what do I do? You're not going to be able to appreciate and apply the lesson of okay, what does confrontation mean? And so stories are our best tool because it gives you something that makes it memorable and shows how it's applied. And again, that is why the Quran is mostly stories. That is how Allah is teaching us about faith, about how to act, about how to interact with people, about how to, move through the world, about how to handle challenges. He's telling us through stories because it's so much easier to remember, oh my God, when Musa did blah, 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 and, alayhi salam, and Sayyidina Isa did this. It's so much easier than just trying to remember. I mean, it's not that it's easier. It just makes the abstract concept of believe, have faith, think positive. It grounds it in something that you can hang on to and be able to use. And so even if you're not a Harry Potter fan, you are so welcome here, and I'm glad you're benefiting. And inshallah, I will see you through the rest of the series, and that you'll become a fan after, right? Who knows? All right. Assalamu alaikum.